So welcome, everybody. We're really happy to be joined tonight by Linda Taffs, a mother, grandmother, and Quaker from the Cowichan Valley on Vancouver Island. Linda's interest in the Palestinian plight began during a trip to Iraq in 1999, where the experiences of conflict and injustice sparked a deep sense of solidarity. The recent pilgrimage deepened her commitment to peace and justice in the region. This past November, Linda participated in this witness pilgrimage to the occupied West Bank and southern Israel, organized by the Canadian Friends of Sabeel, an ecumenical Palestinian liberation theology center in Jerusalem. Linda currently serves as clerk of the Israel-Palestine Working Group associated with the CFSC Canadian Friends Service Committee, advocating for a just resolution to the conflict. Additionally, she's an active member of the ecumenical group Canada Stand Up for Palestinian Children's Rights. Throughout her work, Linda continues to dedicate herself to fostering peace, human rights, compassionate action within both her local and global communities. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you, and thank you, the Vancouver Meeting House, for hosting me and inviting me to come and speak here about my recent trip to Palestine. My reason for going was because I was so frustrated that the bombing of innocent people had been going on for so long, and the international community was not stopping it. And our government was actually still sending weapons or giving weapons and weapon component permits for weapons to go to Israel. So I thought that's making us complicit in a genocide. And I didn't know what to do for a while. I'd written lots of letters, and then I got this invitation from Sabeel. And as Ruth said, Sabeel is an ecumenical theological center based in Jerusalem. And the Friends of Sabeel is the organization that sponsored me to go. And if anyone is ever thinking of going, I really recommend you going with Friends of Sabeel, because they were so helpful with me going, and on the ground there, I never felt unsafe the whole time I was there. They really made a good point of keeping us safe. Also, I have to thank Canadian Friends Service Committee because of their individual grant, which helped me to go as well. So that was really good.
I have an Israeli Canadian friend here on Vancouver Island who's a psychologist, and she worries about the young conscripts that get drafted into the Israeli military, because she says that they are made to do things that go against their humanity and also their religious upbringing. She says that they are suffering from moral damage. So when their time is up from serving in the military, many of them will go abroad and blow their brains out with drugs. And around the time I was there, 6 military personnel committed suicide.
This is my title, and this is also a shot of us outside the Alaska Mosque. The first week we were there was 14 of us, people from Canada and the States. And in the mornings, we got to see quite a bit of the religious aspects of Palestine. And we had a special invitation to go to the Alaska Mosque, and we got a tour inside. We also saw inside where a door had been busted in and windows broken when some Israeli military had gone in when people were playing and praying and shot them, and they have not been allowed to fix that. And I know since returning, the military have also gone back in to the Alaska Mosque and caused some more damage. We went to the churches, nativity, and you can see that my group was the only ones there. There were no tourists there. There were no tourists in Bethlehem. It was just us. And this is Bethlehem by night. You can see that the Palestinian houses are in the foreground, and the settlers, or illegal settlements, surround Bethlehem, and they have no restrictions for electricity, whereas the people of Bethlehem are restricted with their electricity, their water, and freedom of movement. So they're not allowed out. It's almost like they're in an open air prison. And the Israelis are not allowed in. They have all these signs on the entrances of Palestinian towns, warning in 3 different languages that if you go in there, because the Palestinians are terrorists, that's what they believe, and it's dangerous to your life, you could be killed. So, and it's also illegal against Israeli law. And this is a closed tourist center where, you know, not only have they got the owners got laid off, but the workers too. And there's different shops that are all closed up. The hotels were closed because of no tourists. They opened up one for us. And the second week we were there were 49 of us, people from different faiths. There was Mennonites, United Church, Presbyterians, Anglicans, and Quaker faiths joined there. So we went around, and I met this rabbi here, Rabbi Arik Asherman, back here in Vancouver about 20 years ago. He came over to talk about how the Israeli military was impoverishing the Israeli society. He said the seniors, especially the people like who are Holocaust survivors, having a hard time putting food on the table. At that time, he was also a director of Rabbis for Human Rights, and he would go out and try and help the Palestinians pick their olives and get beaten up by the settlers. You're probably familiar with this map. It shows how the Palestinian area has slowly been diminished. And you can see over the time, like how it was in the beginning, the white areas are Jewish areas, and how the white areas are expanding, the Jewish areas are expanding. And now, as the last map shows, there are now just like enclaves, little enclaves, where the settler-only roads that trap them in. So Jeff Harper, who is an Israeli, and he's the head of Israelis Against House Demolitions, he likens all these enclaves to people like renting a room in a hotel, but you're not allowed to use the corridors. So they're all trapped in. This was one of the checkpoints that we went through. Palestinians are walking through, go through like cattle corrals. It's very hard. And they used to start like 2 in the morning for the 5 o'clock opening. And I say used to, because after October the 7th, 2023, 250,000 of their work permits were revoked. So not only do they not have tourists coming for the tourist economy, but the people can't go out to work in Jerusalem like they were. So we went through that one checkpoint, and we went up north to visit a university. And I blurred the faces of these Palestinian women because we were asked not to put them on social media. And I know this video is being recorded and it's going to end up on YouTube. So I did that. The woman that has her head covered, she's training to be a clinical pharmacist, and the other young woman is training to be a lawyer. And the woman with the dark blue is a United Church member from London, Ontario. The woman who had the head covering, she explained that it's not only are you can't get out to go to work or a medical appointment, but it also interferes with family life. She said like they used to go visit their grandparents, and they would go on the main road, and it would take about an hour. But then the main road became a settler-only road, and they weren't allowed on that road. So they spent another 7 hours going around the back roads. And now, since October the 7th, when they 2023, they have not been allowed at all. And I had a lump in my throat when she was saying this, because I thought how horrible it would be if someone was to stop me going to see my grandchildren. Like, how many people here are grandparents? Okay, yeah, or even to see your, as a grandchild, to go see your grandparents, right? It's really heartbreaking, the situation, because all of their towns and cities are like in open air prisons. This is a playground of an area of a senior moment mediation center, like mediation for Palestinians, because they're living under a lot of stress, and this center helps, does counseling, and they have a playground for children and that. But the director was saying one day his child was going to be 10 years old, and he wanted to give a party, and he invited 30 children from the refugee camp next door. So they were playing in the playground when somebody in this watchtower, because the wall is actually, and the tower is built right outside this mediation center, somebody there decided it'd be fun to shoot a sound bomb in the middle of the children, and it's really loud, scared them, and then spray them with skunk water. And skunk water is a chemical that smells really bad, and it's like our skunk spray here. It's really hard to wash out. And you think that's just mean, but then when you really think about it, you think, well, the Israelis are taught that Palestinians are terrorists. So they're going to try and make it uncomfortable for Palestinians, and hopefully they'll leave. And I think that maybe is one of the reasons that was going on. Another day we went south, we went to this Bedouin community, and they used to live in the Negev as nomads, but they got evacuated from their land in the Negev desert, and they bought this piece of land in 1956, but they haven't been allowed to improve their homes on it. And also they're not allowed electricity. Some internationals did give them some solar panels, but they're not sure how long they're going to be allowed to keep that. These settlers are right around the Bedouin community, and they want their land, and they're trying to drive out the Bedouins. So one day they had kids, underage kids, drive sheep into the Bedouins' homes. And when the women tried to prevent it with sticks, they beat up the women, and 4 had to be hospitalized. But when the Bedouin called the police said they can't do anything because these children are underage. We had lunch there. It was a very nice lunch. And one of the leaders of that community was explaining that since the Hamas breaking out of Gaza and killing and kidnapping people, the settlers in that town have got a lot worse. And one of the tricks they've been doing more recently while I was there was making them all get out of their homes at 2 in the morning. So I was kind of fearful. I thought, well, if we're here now, and they drove by and took a look at us, the settlers did, and is it going to make it worse for them that night? And all I was told was, we're just so grateful that you've come. And we heard this over and over again from Palestinians. We're so grateful that you come to show that we're not forgotten. And it gives them hope. We also went to visit this Christian family in southwest of Bethlehem, up in the hills. And this family have had the deeds of their land since the Ottoman period. So they're fighting in court because the military have told them that this is now state land. It's because the settlers, which this farmer is now pointing to as some of the settlers there, their buildings. And the settlers in the night will come and steal the Palestinians' olive trees. And this is one of their olive trees. And they just come with bulldozers and dig them up and take them away. And this land is an area called the Tent of Nations. And the reason it's called the Tent of Nations is because many visitors and volunteers go there to help them keep their land, but they're not allowed any buildings to put the volunteers in. So they have to house them in tents. The settlers, illegal settlers, I should say, have built this religious school. That's the building, largest building you can see there in the middle of the picture. And what's even more troubling is because you'll see the trailer here in the foreground, just on the other side of the fence. And this fence is very close, actually, to the farmer's front yard. And they built a road and put the trailer on. There's actually two trailers. There's one behind the trees. And why that's troubling is because what the settlers do is they'll do this. They'll put the trailers in, then they'll move into the trailers, and then the military are sent to protect the settlers who've moved into these trailers, and then they want a buffer area around. So that's how they gradually lose the land. This young woman is Sahar Bardi. She's a refusenik. She refused to go into the military, which is very hard to do. It's very hard to go against your society. She explained to us that when children start school from this age up, all through school, they're taught that everyone in the world is out to kill them. And they point to times in history when that's actually happened. So when the kids get to be 18, they automatically think about going into the military, like which branch in the military. And for kids that are strong enough to resist that, they have to go to jail. Sahar went 3 times to jail. And the other problem is, it's very hard for a refusenik to get a job afterwards, because an employer will say, I served my time in the military to protect our society. Why haven't you? But Sahar was very lucky because she got a job with the American Friends Service Committee because she didn't go into the military, or part because she didn't go into the military. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the days was arranged for us to go pick olives at a Palestinian farm. It was arranged by Sabeel and Rabbis for Human Rights. We drove down, and while we were waiting to find out exactly which farm to go to, the driver got a phone call saying the military had shown up, and that farm is now designated a military zone. You can't go there. So they chose another farm, and surprise, surprise, that farm also became a military zone. We couldn't go there. So we never did get to go pick olives. And I was very disappointed because they brought down 2 busloads of Israelis, and I was wanting to sit and chat with the Israelis, get their perspective on what's happening there. And they think the reason that the military showed up was because the week before, the rabbis were going to pick olives with some farmers, and settlers showed up and they got beaten up. And they thought we'd get some police protection this time, but instead of the police showing up, the military did. Yeah, and I know that the first guy that I showed you, the Rabbi Arik Asherman, he actually was hospitalized twice by being beaten up by the settlers. And the military's mandate is to protect the settlers. So once a person starts to resist a settler, they get arrested. This is a picture of some of the olives that we didn't get to pick. And we also went down to the border of where Gaza was, and we went to this town called Shuruk. And Shuruk was one of the towns that had the Hamas fighters and people that hung on there. Because I was told by a rabbi in Toronto that Hamas was actually practicing, rehearsing their onslaught for about 2 years. When they went through, a whole bunch of angry young men followed in who hadn't been trained, and I think they did a lot of damage as well. This town built a memorial for people that were killed or prisoners, and it's only 1 mile from Gaza, and you can see Gaza in the background. And school kids come there to this memorial and give the finger to Gaza. We saw that quite a bit. And there's another shot of Gaza with some smoke coming up. We weren't sure whether it was a bomb that had gone off or some demolition. And later on, we found out from the BBC satellite photos that it was a demolition. They were destroying houses to build a military road and cutting off the north of Gaza. So the people there in the north of Gaza at that point had not had any aid in for 60 days. That's when we were there. In the town of Shuruk, these people were survivors of the massacre. The guy in the middle, whose name is, oh dear, another senior moment. Sorry, I've forgotten. Anyway, he explained that they live in fear now, and he will not have his children come back to that town to live. And he is the director of Rabbis for Human Rights. And the other woman, Roni Kada, she also explained that she was part of the peace movement called Another Voice, and she used to try and help Palestinian people in Gaza try to get out for medical appointments. She tried to help them get permits. She also said that there are 400 Israeli peace groups in Israel, and she too learned. She said she also lives in fear. I took this picture of this girl. Not only is she cute, but you can't tell looking at her whether she is a Jewish Israeli or a Palestinian, because they're cousins. They're both Semitic people. So my hope is that when she grows up, Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people will be living in peace again, as they were 100 years ago before the Zionist project took hold. This is a question I get asked quite a bit. Is there any hope? And it's a difficult question to answer, but Palestinians say that change cannot be done without us. So my hope is that you will fill out a petition that I brought to the government asking for 2 ways arms embargo. Least we can do is to try and put pressure on our government to try and stop the permits for the military weapons and weapon components to go. And that's my sharing. And yeah. And I recommend these videos. And also on the table over there is some papers of what you can boycott. It's from the Mennonites, a sheet that the Mennonites made up. And Maxine has got, I think, 5 pages of references that if you would like a copy of them, just please sign up over there and she will send you an electronic copy that you could just click on the links that she has.
That sounds great. Maybe we'll leave that slide up for just another couple minutes so anybody can make a note of it, and then we'll stop the share. But yeah, so we can have some time for some discussions, some Q&A at this point. And I don't know if any questions have come in on the chat there, but one question that I wondering if you have any thoughts about is, it used to be that people spoke a lot about a two-state solution being the best kind of way forward. But then I'm just wondering what the current thinking is amongst progressive people that are looking for a peaceful solution. What do you have any thoughts about two-state versus one-state solutions?
Well, the evidence on the ground shows that that's just about impossible to have 2 states. It seems to go back and forth, and I think it's more like to people who live there, like Palestinians, what do they really want? To get a 2 states, I think the government in Israel would have to go back to the 1967 borders to really make it fair. And that means they would have to expel a lot of those illegal settlers out of those settlements. And one thing I just remembered, I forgot to mention, there are 2 types of settlers. There are people that the government want to fill in those illegal settlements. And so they give them subsidies. They're more economic settlers, right? They're just ordinary people like you and I, but can go out and have a really nice house and all the water and electricity they want and get subsidized. And then, of course, there's the ideological ones, and they're the violent ones. And they've become a lot more violent because just recently, some people in the Knesset, Smotrich, I think his name is, he just gave them 1,000 of the assault rifles. Yeah. So actually, I don't have an answer to your question.
Right.
Maybe someone else does in the room.
Yeah.
Or online. Maxine.
Thank you.
Maxine has her hand up.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead, Maxine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple of things. The list that Linda mentioned is actually short descriptions of and links to a number of Israeli and mixed Israeli-Palestinian organizations that might be of interest, as well as some North American-based organizations that have connections over there that folks can actually find ways to more, and also even go and participate in things like the witness pilgrimage that Linda went on, and olive picking and the rest of it. And I hope people will put down their email address to get a copy. I can also send a copy of some recommended readings, which includes, I think, 3 books explaining how a one-state solution might be implemented, and some other background information. So I'd be happy to share that information online with folks. Yeah, thank you.
That would be great. Thank you, Maxine. So anybody in the room here who has a question, just let me know and I'll hand the mic over, or anybody else online. Okay, Michael, go ahead, unmute yourself. It looks like you're not muted.
Yes, thank you. The computer is a wonderful tool and we all use it. And as a result, we've been able to do a lot of research and educate ourselves on the Israeli-Palestinian issue, something I've been doing for the last 20 years or so. And a lot of the people that I tend to listen to, one in particular strikes me right now would be Miko Piled, the general's son. They give me the idea that most Israelis are not aware of what's going on in Gaza, or at least before October 7th, they weren't. And I find that really hard to believe, but I've been led to believe that they are so brainwashed, they either don't know or they don't want to know. What would be your take on that?
The rabbi that lives in that town very close to the Gaza border said that they have a very harsh censorship in Israel. So that's part of the problem. Also, I think because they've been so brainwashed from childhood up, they really aren't really looking into the situation in Gaza. But this Rabbi Avi Bush says that he feels that they really don't know how bad it is, which is hard for us to believe all the way over here. Then we know how bad it is, and we see it all the time.
The Haaretz does quite a good job. The newspaper Haaretz does quite a good job of getting out some of the truths.
Yeah, they have to want to read an English paper.
I've been fairly closely watching the situation since I served on the New England Regional Office Executive Committee, and Everett Mendelsohn was in Israel and wrote the pamphlet, The Two-State Solution. This was back in the late 70s, early 80s. And and I agree with Linda. I mean, Palestine is no longer, it's just completely fractured by all the settlements. And I'm not, and except for withdrawing to the 67 borders, I don't know how much hope there is. On the other hand, I've always had an abiding interest in the Ramallah Friends School. And there was a member of my meeting in Cambridge who grew up in that meeting and sensitized me to their work and the kind of countervailing peace education that those kids get who go to that school. It's a mixed bag, but you know, these waves and waves of trauma and traumatized people keep coming around back and traumatizing other people. And how do we break that cycle? Mm. You know, I mean, the original Jewish settlers of the Holy Land, and I think Haaretz was an important voice for those folks in the Zionist movement, even back then. They were deeply traumatized by what had happened in Europe, of course, and were looking for a home. And you see this kind of traumatizing of Palestinians is, to me, I don't know how to say it, deeply sinful in a spiritual sense, mm-hmm. Right? So I don't have any answers or suggestions other than unless Palestine gets some territorial integrity, I don't see a two-state solution arising out of that. Although I hope that there would be at some point where they could actually live in peace as brothers side by side. That's the long time dream. So, but anyway, if I don't know, Linda, you have any other further comments of if there's anything that I said that resonates with what you experienced, that would be great to hear.
I see Tina and then Maxine. So go ahead, Tina.
Hello, Linda. Thank you for sharing your talk with us. That was really informative.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if it's more. I mean, the way I think about it is it's more useful for us here in Canada not to spend too much time thinking about a one-state solution or a two-state solution or exactly how this gets solved, unless there's some political science experts out there that have influence. But I think the most important thing we can do is speak out like you're doing, Linda, and put pressure on our government. And I think the repression has gotten really bad here in Canada. I mean, I know in the United States, it's a lot worse, but like last week I was protesting against the Vancouver Public Library ban on Palestinian symbols, and there were about 25 of us shouting in the library, and 15 police officers came and threatened to arrest us for yelling in a public library about Palestine. So, I mean, I think we have a lot to fight against here, just in terms of speaking out and changing the narrative that's, here where we are. And so I'm hoping that you spreading this information to all of us can help inspire us to take some real action.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Maxine.
Yeah, couple of things. One of the things, I think that was Eric that was speaking. One of the things that Eric said resonated, particularly talked about people, Israelis and Palestinians living together side by side. And I want to point out that the group Standing Together, that's one of the ones on that list of mine, are modeling that. I mean, these are Palestinian and Jewish citizens of Israel. They are already living together side by side, and they're trying to improve the situation there at the same time as opposing the occupation, this siege on Gaza that's been going on since 2007, and so on. So they're a really good group to know about. And what's the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, putting pressure on our government is definitely important. And yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you.
Great, Ellen.
This has been a very interesting discussion, especially the bit about talking about crossing borders between Palestinian and Israeli people and doing that internationally. We hear a lot about that here, and I'm wondering to what extent you were able to hear that on your trip, and whether what people are saying there in terms of where they see a prospect for the future, whether they have a different perspective on it from what we were able to hear at this distance.
I think the people there are very depressed. Netanyahu was at the UN of September 2024, showing a map where there was no Palestinian area left. So they knew what was going to be happening. And since the ceasefire, it's got so much worse in the West Bank. Like my last thing I saw, and it could be worse now, is like 40,000 people in the West Bank have lost their homes. And the settlers are a lot more violent. And so is the military there, just going in and destroying homes, making Palestinians get out of their homes without even their ID. And they're not allowed to go back and get it. So it's really, really bad there. And they are depressed. And that's why I think they kept saying to us, thank you for coming. You are our hope. You have to go back and work on your own government. We can't do it alone. We need your help. And as I said, there was 49 of us the second week we were there, different denominations from Canada and the US. And they're all, like me, have gone back and they're just trying to speak. And I know that Sabeel is now organizing another 4 delegations right now. So they're wanting people to go this spring and summer. And I think in Canada, the Canadian Friends of Sabeel are organizing another delegation to go in the fall. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. It's a space for me to ask another one. One of the things that we're reading right now is about the Gazification of the West Bank. And I was wondering if you were seeing that where when you were there in November, or whether you've been in touch more and could expand upon what we're beginning to hear about that.
I don't know any more than you do. The ceasefire happened after I left, and it's been since then. It's, because when I was there, the North Gaza was being cut off, and like North Gaza is where they've got the oil and the gas fields. So I thought that's what they're after. And then I guess there was pressure put on the Israelis to let the Palestinians go back home. They have any homes to go back to. And then I heard that there was restricting the food and the tents that they were supposed to provide them. And then just more recently, they've cut off the electricity, and no aid's getting in. The UN says no aid is getting in right now, anywhere in Gaza. It's not getting in.
I'm thinking back to the early 70s when we were in North Africa, and how when you went to the souks, the Arabs and the Jews were working side by side and having their tea and lunches together, and you know, everything seemed like such an ordinary kind of a great life. And then you talk about the settlers that are funded to be there, and I understand that a whole lot of them are not even Jewish. They simply went in as well, I mean, I know for a fact that one of my ex-neighbors, who was a few years older than me, went to Israel, and his family was definitely not Jewish. So he went as a settler and had married and had kids over there. I have not kept track of them, but a lot of those settlers are, and so they aren't Semites. Even a lot of the Jews that went in the first place weren't Semites. They weren't from the area originally, which is probably why they originally looked at maybe going to someplace like West Africa, whereas whites, they could take over because the Europe and North America would be on their side. You know, there's a lot of racism involved. I spoke to a Jewish African woman whose family had moved to Israel thinking that this was going to be a really good deal. And the racism against them was horrendous. So, you know, there's a combined.
I just want to make the point though, when I said that, you know, like 100 years ago they were living together, and when I first went to Palestine in 2014, there was a Palestinian historian who mentioned that, you know, they were living together, and I've seen pictures of what you mentioned, but in Palestine there, and also a dear friend of mine, Frida Knott. I don't know if you know her. She's with Independent Jewish Voices in Victoria. Her uncle was in business with a Palestinian. They were business partners. And it's a Zionist project that is doing this, and they have never defined their borders.
I see Michael has his hand up. Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, thank you. I very much appreciated the film that you showed. Thank you. I was quite taken by the comment that the people were thanking you. It lets them know that the world hasn't forgotten about us, about them. That really touches me to hear that. I wanted to make a comment, and that is that it hardly seems likely that a two-state solution is viable to me, considering the rhetoric that's been coming from the Israeli side since 1948. There's always been the Greater Israel Plan that seems to be foremost. And as we all know, we can do much worse than Netanyahu. There are people much worse than him and his government that have tremendous amount of power. One can easily say that right now what we're looking at is a one-state solution. It's been a one-state solution since 1948, in my opinion. And the one young lady, Tina, you hit upon something that is important to us in the United States right now. And that is, if you're paying attention, you know that under the Trump administration, there's a witch hunt going on right now. And they're using AI tools to identify people, mainly students, who've been making pro-Palestinian comments. They're going back for years, and they're doing this by the tens of thousands of people with these AI tools. And they're identifying people that have made pro-Palestinian comments, and they're arresting them. They're arresting them right now at schools, in the streets, everywhere. There's a real witch hunt going on right now in the United States. It'll be up to the courts to prove whether or not this is against our right to assemble and our rights to free speech.
Well, thank you, Michael. That's terrifying. Justin, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This has been very informative, and I'm really glad that I took the time to join. Ruth and Linda, you made the point about 100 years ago, at one time you had the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims all living together in Jerusalem, and I always like to go back in history and kind of look at the geopolitics. And I actually might get my brother Rob Hughes, who is a historian, to speak to this. But you have to look back to what happened when the Ottoman Empire was falling, and I believe it was called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which basically the British and the French, and I don't know what other empires kind of cut up the Palestine area, and after they had made promises, after the Arabs, had joined to overthrow the Ottoman Empire so that they would get their own state. So, I mean, I think that really underlines a lot of the issues to start with. And the other thing I just wanted to mention too, and the gentleman, Michael from the States, kind of alluded to it, is you can't even say the word Palestine or pro-Palestine. People are going to think that you're anti-Semitic. I was married to a woman who was, had some Jewish heritage. I could not even say the word Palestine to her. I mean, so, and then I have friends that have, really good Jewish friends, and I cannot even raise this issue with them. So it's just a real, it's like it's like just you're just wait. It's explosive, right? You're just waiting to throw like a little match on it. You can't. So you can't even talk about this issue often. So I thank you for listening, and I'm really glad I joined this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Nick, would you like to unmute yourself and share?
Yeah, I like Maxine, I'm a member of IJV Vancouver, although I currently live somewhere else in the province. And I thank you all for hosting this. I came because I'm considering going to the West Bank in a few months myself. So it was really good to hear from Linda. I did just want to chime in to emphasize something Linda just said in her last moment speaking, which is that I'd really push people not to talk about Jews and Palestinians living together, because the issue, in my view, is that falls into the framing, like the equation of the Zionist entity, the Israeli state project, with the Jewish people. And that promotes this idea that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, as Michael was talking about in the US and the last speaker. And I think it also promotes this idea that there's sort of like a civilizational scale conflict between Jews and Palestinians, between the West and the East, right? It's sort of an Orientalist idea. And yeah, like the majority of people living in Israel are Jewish, but Israel is not the Jewish people. And the issue is not that they're Jews and Palestinians and they can't get along. The issue is that they're in a settler colonial project that's engaged in mass scale dispossession and genocide, and that's why they can't get along. And so I just encourage people sort of to be really careful with the way they talk about it, because I think when we talk about it as the question of Jews and Palestinians living together, we're kind of playing into the whole project of equating the Jewish people with the state of Israel, which I think it's really important that we push against, not only for the hope of sort of coming to some sort of peaceful solution in the end, but also for the safety of Jews, going forward. I don't want to be equated with the state of Israel. So yeah, thanks for listening and thanks for hosting this. It was great.
I think there were some comments in the chat which weren't necessarily questions, but Madeline, did you want to expand at all? I think you posted something about the need for international, like the huge need for international visitors. Did you want to add anything to that so that those of us in the room can?
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you so much, Linda. As Linda and Maxine and others have let us know, there's a lot of groups using nonviolence approaches in Israel, Palestine, and in the West Bank, particularly now. And I think the question earlier about the Gazification of the West Bank, what I am hearing from the friends who are working there in the West Bank is that, yeah, the attacks and the presence of the Israel occupation forces are, really increasing, and the violence is worse there. And then some of the cutoffs of supplies and electricity and things like that are happening as well. So it really looks like the West Bank needs people there on the ground. And the very same comment that you made, Linda, too, when I was just on a Zoom on Sunday morning with the team there. The Palestinian leader was just saying, we just need people here to know that we're not invisible, to be here as support. And one of my students who was just over and is going back again in unarmed civilian protection and accompaniment was here yesterday, and that was her experience in November when she was there. They're just really wanting people to come and be present as a deterrent, as accompaniment, to be there through the night when they're making the family get out, and be present with them when they're having to get out at 2 a.m. and all these kinds of things. So unarmed civilian protection and accompaniment is the community of practice, the new field of nonviolent practice that's been used actually for a long time. Gandhi even got it started, but it's really growing a lot. And Nonviolent Peace Force is one of the leading organizations. But this isn't a Nonviolent Peace Force project. This is from the retired co-founder of Nonviolent Peace Force with David Hartsaw. And trying to just get 100 unarmed civilian protection internationals there to work with Palestinians and really who are willing to be part of it as well, in a bunch of different organizations to be able to have a lot more mobility to get where people are needed at any time. So for instance, in the olive harvest earlier, if they had more people, there would have been less of the violence towards the people coming to harvest, and accompanying them through checkpoints, accompanying them, the shepherds and so on, accompanying them in their lives in the West Bank as a way of claiming that land instead of having the settlers take it over. So yeah, feel free to be in touch with me, and I can put you in touch or get in touch directly with Mel Duncan. I put his email in the chat as well. Thanks.
That's great. I'm wondering if anybody who hasn't yet spoken might have a question or a comment.
Yes, beside you.
Yeah, great.
There's a lot of years of experience of peace work in this room, and I was just curious, like, what feels familiar about the present moment and what feels different, if that makes sense.
I think that was to anyone, right? You said in this room. Yeah.
What feels like familiar and what feels different about the present moment
In terms of peace work?
in terms of, yeah, peace activism. Yeah.
Probably the oldest person in the room. It's all, you know, we've got a further reach now. We used to have to put a lot of work into getting people to come out. But now you send it through and there's all these Zoom meetings. And so in a way it's easier, but whether it's having any more effect, we don't know, because in the old days when we had huge marches, there used to be effect. And so I think it equals out, but it was a lot more work in the old days than it is now. But whether we actually achieve any more, I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to get to the politicians. You send letters, they don't actually read them. And so.
Yeah, I guess I was just kind of thinking about doing this type of work as a leading, and I'm kind of imagining that I know you've done other pilgrimages and so on in the past, but what was it like for you experiencing that? Did you experience it as what you would call a leading, and was it something, you know, what was that like for you to think about making the decision to go and all of that? Any sort of reflections you might have on that?
Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, I was extremely frustrated, you know, because I just couldn't understand. I still don't understand how the international community are not stopping what's happening there right now, right? And it's really heartbreaking. It's frustrating, and I didn't know what to do. And I kept putting it out to the universe, actually, what more can I do? And then I got this invitation to go, and then I could not go. And then I thought, well, actually, I don't have the money to go. And then the money came. People got a really nice donation, and then I got a bursary from Sabeel and a grant from Canadian Friends of Service Committee. So I went, and I really felt that was a leading. It was all laid out. Like it's like just had to happen. And when I was there, because I was with a whole bunch of other people who really cared about the issue the same way as I do, it was really bonding and worthwhile. And Ruth, you would like this. There was a choir director on the trip, and on our buses we did a lot of singing. Yes, yeah, yeah. So and it was like heartbreaking, but it was also uplifting, especially when so many Palestinians thanked us for coming, and they said we're brave, and I said we're not brave. Brave ones are going into Gaza. Yes, yeah.
How long was your trip?
It was just 2 weeks. But a friend of mine in Saskatoon's daughter is a doctor that comes and goes in and out of Gaza all the time. She is the brave one. Yeah, she was just here recently. She's just got back into Gaza, and she's going to be coming back in May. And then she's going to be speaking in Victoria, I know, so maybe here in Vancouver again. Yeah, Dr. Nanan. Yeah. Yes. Irene and I were going to see it, but then there was a snowstorm, so we didn't come over. But I did hear online.
Did you?
Just talking about the old days, and for me, the old days was South Africa. I mean, we know that this is a worse apartheid than South Africa ever was. I was in South Africa in 1990. We were listened in on for a lot of meetings and things, so we sang. And if we were singing, then they couldn't hear the people that were actually discussing things, and they made the cops really mad. But we had a First Nations woman on our tour, and they hadn't recognized that she was part of our tour, so she was able to listen into them making these snide remarks. It was quite good. I mean, we were able to meet with people easily, and there wasn't nearly the things that are going on in Gaza and West Bank. I mean, yes, there were shootings and things, but not nearly as bad as what this is. And then when I went back in '94 for the election, during the election, things had changed completely. And that's, especially as a white woman walking alone in different parts of the areas, the young black men would get off the street in 1990. They would cross the street. They're not going to take any chance on being accused of attacking a white woman, right? But when I went back in '94, I just smiled and said hi to everybody anyway, but I'd get a high five from the guys. Yeah, mama. But that was, that was really, really fast in comparison. But this has been going on, so yeah.
I think Maxine has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, a couple of things. Dr. Noonan, I think you mentioned, who's in Gaza right now. She spoke at Trinity Grace Church in Vancouver a few weeks ago. I missed it because I couldn't find the church. But that recording is now okayed for sharing. So if you want, I can send a link to that. If you want to, put that on the sign-up sheet. The other thing is that just putting in a plug for the huge variety of ways that one can go and show solidarity. I think very few people, certainly not me, are in a position to commit to a whole year. However, there are things like Sabeel, there are various organizations, Center for Jewish Nonviolence, community peacemaker teams, formerly Christian peacemaker teams, and others that do shorter term projects of go for a week or two to be a protective presence. And so it's a rotating protective presence, but I think that is also important. And yeah, so I encourage you to get a copy of that list of different possible ways to participate. Thanks again.
I put a sign-up sheet over there for people to sign if they want a copy of those lists, Maxine. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just reminding them because sometimes people forget by the end of the session.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, our intention is to post this video on the Vancouver meeting website, and so people can share it around. And let's see. Aaron says, "Can you put me on the sign-up sheet?"
One of us.
Okay, sure. We didn't exactly talk about how long we were going to go, but it's sort of feeling like maybe it's wrapping up. So just going to ask if there's any final questions or comments. Let's see. Who's just? Oh, okay. I see you, Justin. Great. Yeah. Okay.
so I just want to put another plug in for the petition I have over there.
Yes, the petition. Now, how are we going to get that to the people online?
Well, I don't know that.
Could we post a link to it with the videos, or could you, is there a link to it? There's no link. It's paper. Okay, well, we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can somehow post it with the video, like as a PDF or something like that online. Okay, well.
Well, thank you.
And Rob, okay. Okay, well, I guess I'm sure everybody joins me in. Okay. All right, well, I hope everybody will join me in thanking Linda so much for coming and sharing her experience with us all. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you,
And I'm
Linda.
sorry we can't share the food with the people online.
I know, I know. And thank you everybody on Zoom for being here, and check back in, I don't know exactly when, a week or two, on the Quaker website, and hopefully we'll have the link posted there. So, okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm working on it.